coast. We are expecting it to continue to strengthen, so don't be surprised if in this next update that we are expecting at 5 a.m. Eastern time, if we are, of course, going to also hear that it has bumped up to a Category 4 potentially. So we are going to get updates every 3 hours or so. As I said, the next one is expected to come down at 5 a.m. Eastern time, and then we are going to get another one at 8 a.m. Eastern time. We do have our reporters covering this story for us. The Tampa-St. Petersburg area appears to be in the bullseye, although this system has tracked slightly east, so it is now the eye of this storm is set to hit slightly south of the Tampa area, closer to that Sarasota area. We're actually going to be touching base with our Fox Tampa team, who are live right now with team coverage of this storm. So I do want to send you out live, raw, and unfiltered to their coverage. Let's listen in.
Hours ago, the models were saying this was coming straight through Tampa Bay, and again, it has shifted a little bit to the east and to the south, which does spare us some, not all, some of the impacts, but it really puts some serious situation going on down there and around the Cape Coral area as well. Look at the size of the eye of this storm. So yesterday, it underwent what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. So when the pressure in the inner eye sometimes gets too great, what will happen is a bigger eye will come in and just kind of push that one out and redevelop, if you will. It's kind of a weakening process. It sometimes can take as long as 24 hours, but it looks like this took less than 24 hours. So now it has, you know, it has a small window today, maybe 12 hours, for it to strengthen a little bit before it does make its way onshore to the south of us. And that red right around the center of the storm, we've been seeing some lightning in there. That is a sign of an intensifying hurricane. Now, the eye wall itself still looks a little ragged. Again, it's trying to finish its eye wall replacement cycle. So it's kind of a good thing it went through this just before making landfall rather than intensifying rapidly as it was doing so. And it's all headed up to the north-northeast at about 10 miles per hour. So 120 mile per hour winds. It is 85 miles west-southwest of the Naples area now, and it's just kind of drifting to the north-northeast at about 10 miles per hour. So a couple of things positive for us. Number one, of course, making landfall to the south of us. That would get more of a northeast wind later this afternoon and tonight, which will probably drain the water out of the bay again like we had in Irma. But the other thing is, now that it's going to make landfall a little bit sooner, it's going to keep moving. It's not going to stall out. It's still going to bring prolific amounts of rainfall to us. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that it's going to at least continue to move in a forward direction rather than stall out makes a big difference. So tropical storm force winds and wind gusts will likely move in this morning over the next, 6 to 8 hours or so. As far as hurricane force winds, you see them there in the red. And that obviously the Fort Myers area, that whole region is going to get hit very hard. But places like Arcadia, Wauchula, wouldn't surprise me to see Bartow, Frostproof. You're going to get hurricane force wind gusts. This will be late tonight and very early tomorrow morning. Tampa, St. Petersburg, Bradenton, we're going to be in that range of about, 58 miles per hour to 68 miles per hour. So it's nothing to sneeze at. It's enough to cause damage. But the hurricane force winds would stay inland at that point. And then, of course, they'll weaken as the storm weakens. And even tomorrow morning, we're still looking at tropical storm force winds as well. Multiple inches of rain are going to come down, and we will still have a little bit of a storm surge in the Tampa Bay area. But again, the positive is it's moving to the south of us, and it's going to keep moving rather than stalling out. So we'll tell you what that means for rainfall amounts, wind gusts. We'll break it down for you hour by hour in just a few minutes, okay?
All right, Dave, thank you. 4:04 the time now to Sarasota County. Ian's outer bands are moving in. Those who live in zones A and B are under mandatory evacuations.
And emergency officials are warning people to get out now if they haven't already. Storm surge, flooding, and tornadoes are all big concerns for Sarasota right now. And the mandatory evacuation order includes the barrier islands, where water service has been shut off to residents and businesses ahead of the storm. Traffic has also been shut down on the islands. The same goes for the islands in Manatee County, and officials don't want people driving around as conditions gradually worsen. The emergency management director warns the area will experience power outages and flood damage from the storm.
This is destruction. Our rivers are already at flood stage. Couple inches of water, couple 12, 15, 20 inches of rain, it's just going to exacerbate the whole thing. It's going to be, you can't be there.
I just thought it'd probably be best to have a full tank because it's a longer drive out there, first of all. Second of all, like, I don't know how many days, if power goes out and we lose gas, then I want to be able to drive around if I need to help someone or if I need to get somewhere, do something.
Emergency officials say by 8 o'clock last night, about 1,700 people were in shelters in Sarasota County, and they expect even more people to arrive. Officials say the county's 311 Connect line is open for anyone with questions about the storm. It's available around the clock starting today. Representatives took more than 1,000 calls yesterday alone.
Now, you mentioned Manatee County. That's where we'll go here. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered for everyone in zones A and B. Emergency officials say if you have not left by now, you are almost out of time. Not out of time, almost out of time. Fox 13's Elizabeth Fry joins us live outside of the storm shelter at Braden River High School.
And Elizabeth, the shelters down there are really filling up.
Yeah, that's right. The county here has already closed several of them. I just checked the website, 9 of them to be exact. But the good news is there's still about a dozen shelters here in Manatee County that are still open. We're outside of Braden River High School here in Manatee County. That is one of the shelters still available for folks who are evacuating this morning. And like Walter just said, there still is a little bit of time left, but not a lot. So if you are in zones A or B, those are under mandatory evacuations. Zone C is also a recommended evacuation. If you've been debating whether or not to leave, now is the time to get to one of these shelters before it's unsafe. And eventually it is going to get to that point as the winds and rains are only going to get more intense as the morning goes on. So as officials were telling residents yesterday, you're running out of time to heed these evacuation orders. Now, tens of thousands did evacuate yesterday, though. Many businesses, restaurants, and gas stations here in Manatee County, they've also been boarded up as residents are taking this message seriously. Officials have now started monitoring conditions for flooding and other impacts as the storm continues to get closer, but their message to residents remains the same. If you're in an evacuation zone, please leave before you no longer can.
Don't wait until it's too late, because we will shut down the roads when the winds are too high to safely navigate through the county.
There will be a certain point when conditions can become dangerous for our officers to be on the roads. And that's one reason why we want people to have a plan and to leave if they're in an evacuation zone.
And that's the main focus of why law enforcement wants residents to heed these warnings. Once the conditions become too dangerous, officers will no longer respond, leaving you stranded in an emergency. Plus, flooding could leave roads impassable, creating issues even after the storm passes for those who do decide to stay. Now, officers and first responders, they are stationed throughout the county for as long as they can be. But once those conditions get too dangerous, they will be pulled off the street. That's why now is the time to get to these evacuation shelters. If you still haven't and you need to, now is the time to do so. Like I said, some of them are now closed, but we do have a list of what's open, what's closed up on our website under the Manatee County Hurricane Ian section. You can find that at fox13news.com. Jen, Walter.
Yeah, now's the time, if you haven't found a safe place to stay, to do that now. Elizabeth Fry reporting for us. Thank you. And it's not just coastal areas that are bracing for impact. The same goes for our inland areas, including Polk County. Emergency managers there say the region is bracing for high winds, tornadoes, and flash flooding, especially near the Peace River, which is already overflowing its banks because of recent rains. While no evacuation orders have been issued for Polk County, it has also opened up a few shelters, including ones for people with special needs and families with pets. Officials say people should not hesitate to come if they fear their home is not a safe place to be.
As Dave mentioned earlier, Ian's forecast track has shifted to the south. Not so good news for Fort Myers, but it does bode well for Hillsborough County. Despite the southerly shift, Tampa still has some concerns, though. 5 to 10 feet of storm surge is no longer likely, and that's what the good news is. And that's great for folks who live in South Tampa, especially those along Bayshore Boulevard, known to flood during storms. And because of storm surge, it's not expected to be catastrophic. TECO no longer plans to preemptively shut off power to critical areas of downtown. We were talking about, Davis Islands yesterday, parts of Davis Islands and Harbor Island. Meanwhile, Mayor Jane Castor says she's encouraged by the number of people who left in zones A and B, which are under mandatory evacuations.
Everything is a possibility, but right now with the trajectory, if we don't have the damage that was predicted before and, entire neighborhoods are impacted, then there won't be a need to put a curfew in place. We're not coming out of this unscathed. There is going to be widespread flooding in our city.
The city has given out more than 100,000 sandbags. It has ensured that nursing homes have working generators, and it will have 1,000 officers on the streets as opposed to the normal figure of 600. Officials do expect power outages. 3,500 extra TECO workers are on hand to restore electricity as soon as possible. An important update regarding special needs shelters in Hillsborough County. One has just closed and another one has just opened. The special needs shelter at Irwin Technical College in Tampa has reached capacity and is no longer accepting evacuees. In its place, the county has opened a special needs shelter at the Yingling Center, and it is pet friendly as well. This is just one of several shelters in Hillsborough County. Folks seeking shelter should make arrangements as soon as possible.
In Pinellas County, police are now restricting all access to Clearwater Beach ahead of the storm, and residents across the county who chose not to leave are now being urged to shelter in place. Officials say high winds are expected to arrive later this morning and could create hazardous driving conditions. And while the storm surge isn't as much of a concern anymore, heavy rainfall could still cause flooding in low-lying areas. Yesterday, many folks in Pinellas were busy packing to evacuate, securing their property, or preparing to hunker down for the storm. One man we spoke with said they emptied their house last week for a move up north.
So we got lucky. All our stuff is out of the house, and now we're just kind of doing some prep work on the house and trying to get ready for, for the storm.
Taking everything out of the backyard, all of our fencing, pulled up all of our boat lift, moved everything inside as much as possible, raised everything up.
Again, mandatory evacuation orders are in place for zones A, B, and C in Pinellas County, along with all mobile homes. Once sustained winds reach 40 miles per hour, emergency responders will be off the roads, and they will not be able to respond to most calls. Access to the county's barrier islands from Tierra Verde to Dunedin Causeway remains cut off. Residents can still evacuate, but anyone who leaves will not be allowed to return until law enforcement has determined it's safe.
I know you were reading. Did you see that they put their plastic Adirondack chairs in the pool? Brilliant.
Oh, that is a good idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Pasco County mandatory evacuation has been issued for people in Zone A, along with people living in manufactured homes, mobile homes, and flood-prone areas. Zones B and C are under voluntary evacuations at this point, and officials are urging people to heed these orders. Many people have done just that, including Roger Jones and his wife. They packed their car with plenty of supplies, and they drove up to Spring Hill, where they're going to ride out the storm with some friends.
Did you even think about staying? I thought about it. There are several people in the park that are staying, but just don't want to take a chance,
And flooding is top of mind for people who live on the water, like Tom Stetler. He went the extra mile. He rented a U-Haul, loaded it up with furniture inside his home. He plans to drive it several miles inland and park it at his wife's workplace just for some peace of mind. He also took steps to make sure his sailboat is prepared for the storm.
And in Hernando County, evacuations are underway in all areas west of US 19. This includes zones A, B, and C, along with coastal residents. Meanwhile, in Citrus County, a mandatory evacuation is underway in Zone A and low-lying areas west of Highway 19. All other areas are under voluntary evacuations. Well, rain and snow may not stop the mail, but a hurricane sure will. The U.S. Postal Service is temporarily suspending mail delivery and retail operations in central and southwest Florida due to the storm. Now, this includes Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, Polk, Sarasota, Manatee, and Hernando counties. No word yet on when service will resume. The Postal Service says it'll do so when it's safe, and we'll keep you posted. And in Tampa, the Seminole Hard Rock says its casino will close at 8 a.m. ahead of the storm. The hotel, however, will remain open, but with limited guest services. The Hard Rock says they'll closely monitor the storm to determine when they plan to reopen.
All right, still ahead, staying safe after the storm.
We'll run down the things not to do once Hurricane Ian finally leaves our area. Plus, many of you are prepared for power outages. Sometimes it takes days to get your lights back on after a storm, but new technology may help this time around.
Our Fox Tampa team providing excellent coverage of this storm as it does inch closer to the Florida coast here. We are streaming live, raw, and unfiltered coverage of Hurricane Ian as it does inch towards the Florida coast here. You did just hear that the cone has shifted ever so slightly. It does appear that it is not going to be a direct hit for the Tampa area, but now shifted towards a Fort Myers direct hit. So we will continue to monitor this track. The latest 2 a.m. update did put Hurricane Ian still at a Category 3 storm, moving at just 10 miles per hour with sustained winds at 120 miles per hour. The next update from the National Hurricane Center is expected to come down at 5 a.m. Eastern time. It will give us an update on Ian's path, also the winds, sustained winds that it currently is forcing, and of course as an update on the storm surge. Just how long it is expected to hover over Florida, if the storm is speeding up or slowing down. Obviously, slowing down is of major concern. It gives it more time to strengthen and also gives it more time over the Florida Peninsula. At 7:30 a.m. Eastern time, we are expected to get the next update from Governor Ron DeSantis as Ian is set for landfall in Florida later on today. So we are continuing our wall-to-wall coverage of Hurricane Ian right here on Live Now from Fox. Our Fox Orlando team are also monitoring this system. I do want to dip into their coverage here. Let's listen in live, raw, and unfiltered.
Now for Sanford at Seminole County into Orange, Osceola over toward Lake County, Polk, and as you get closer to Okeechobee and then back out toward the west side of the state. And we talk about the arrival of the winds gradually. After about lunchtime, the winds are going to be on the rise, and those will pepper in through the afternoon into the evening for the overnight. Going to be a long haul. So here's what we got for you. At 10 o'clock, want everyone to be in place, be in a safe place. Downpours and a tornado risk is going to be unfolding. It is right now. We've had bouts of heavy rain moving through in some of the outer rain bands, and within that, we've seen a few tornado-warned areas down in the far southern peninsula, but as far north as the Treasure Coast. So we've got our eyes on that. 1 p.m. winds rise today. Tornadic risk rising. Spotty flash flooding by 7. Steady downpours continue, flash flooding, and the risk of tornado areas. And again, as we look at the timeline for tomorrow, by sunrise, gusty winds to 55+ miles per hour. We'll have widespread power outages lunchtime. Gusts to about 65+, and then by 5 o'clock, heavy rain backs off, gusts to continue. Now, as you look at the modeling, you can see how, again, these rain bands come in, dumping the heavy rain. Winds will continue to freshen on up, and these rain bands, you know, within that, you get that rotation. A lot of times we see that with landfall engulfed systems, really any tropical system, but the angling is just right, so all the ingredients, the recipe is perfect for an outbreak of some stronger areas of rotation, and I can see that lifting up and away from the region. So we also talk about a severe risk. Allison Gargaro joins me now in the Fox 35 Storm Center to talk more. Allison, of now a level 3 very likely risk. Tell our viewers what that means to them and their families.
Well, you probably don't hear that we are under a level 3 very likely risk often. That usually happens if we see cold fronts moving into the viewing area. But all of the counties that are shaded in this darker brown on your screen, there is a very likely risk that we could be seeing not only tornadoes, but also damaging wind gusts. And this is something that we're going to be watching very closely for you. I actually want to take you into our Fox 35 Storm Tracker radar to see what's going on across the atmosphere. This is that center of circulation of Ian. A few lightning strikes within it, but really lightning is not going to be a key factor in what we'll be seeing throughout the day today. It's these outer rain bands that have already started to spin. So I do want to take you into our viewing area. We have what we call stratiform rain. So it's just going to be coming down at a very even pace, not too heavy, not too light. But you can see some areas going to be seeing that heavy rain in southern Osceola County. But I do want to take you up into Brevard right now along that I-95 corridor in Mims towards Southmere and actually heading toward our Fox 35 Storm Tracker radar, which is in East Orange County. But let's take you down south. We are under a tornado watch in South Florida. That's until 5 o'clock this morning, likely to be extended and actually pushed up to the north. Could be in our viewing area a little bit later this afternoon. Now, Now, I do want to talk about our tornado tracker. The atmosphere is going to be spinning with that tropical influence. So in the areas that are shaded in bright red and purple on your screen, so in Osceola, Polk County by 7 o'clock this morning, that's where we could be seeing a heightened risk for any of that tornado activity. It continues to move to the north across our viewing area by 9, 10, 11 o'clock this morning, potentially a few cells along our immediate east coast. But if we continue through, you can see that center of circulation coming onshore and really creating that rotation, like Chief Meteorologist Jamie King said, like a corkscrew in the atmosphere. There is that. You see those very dark blues. That's going to be the highest risk where we could be seeing those tornadoes. Timestamp noon tomorrow. So this is only going to continue as we do see some of that spin in the atmosphere. So just remember to depend on the Fox 35 storm team. And Jamie, turn those notifications on your Fox 35 storm team weather app.
So Allison, you know, power outages are going to be a big deal around here, and that's another great thing about the app, friends, is that you can stream our coverage live on the app. So you lose power, your mobile device is charged, you are good to go. Again, as Allison mentioned, it is. We want you all to depend on us. Keeping you and your family members safe is literally our top priority here. We got a tough road ahead here in the coverage, but we're up to it, and we will certainly meet the demands of this big task coming into Central Florida with in regard to Ian. So that's all for now from the Storm Center. We'll go ahead and send it over to Allison now. Al, we'll give it to you now with a look at your Skyfox traffic.
Well, good morning, everyone. I do want to take you out. There are a few crashes that we're monitoring right now. No roadblocks associated with them. And we are telling folks to stay in place starting at 10 o'clock this morning. And so just something to keep in mind. There is one crash that we're monitoring. That's going to be on the 436 eastbound crash at 1792. And where we saw a big backup yesterday from Polk into Osceola County, things are in the green right now, but I will continue to monitor those conditions for you. As for now, we'll send it back to you.
Allison, Jamie, thanks. We'll stay with Fox 35. So many different angles of this storm. We will continue our coverage of Hurricane Ian all morning long.
We're going to take a look at how Ian is impacting our theme parks after the break. But first, let's take another look at Ian's track this morning. You can see it there on the left of your screen. Now, when you look at the right, you see the conditions in Port Charlotte right now. Ian is currently a Category 3 hurricane, but it's expected to strengthen as it makes its way towards Florida. Another track due out at 5 a.m. And we'll be right back.
And back out to our X-Rad radar we go as we continue to monitor this system. We're going to be dipping in and out of our Fox 35 Orlando coverage and also in and out of our Fox 13 Tampa coverage as they cover this storm from every angle. The powerful Hurricane Ian is closing in on the Florida West Coast. We do know that the cone shifted a bit at first. Initially, we had predicted and seen, as per the National Hurricane Center, a direct hit for the Tampa Bay area. It does appear that now that eye is headed towards Fort Myers, so a bit more south on that west coast of Florida. But of course, this is an ever-evolving system. We are expecting another update from the National Hurricane Center to come down at 5 a.m. Eastern time. And when that does, we will bring you all of the details here on Live Now from Fox. It's 4:23. We're going to step away for a quick 2-minute commercial break. More news and more information on Hurricane Ian as it inches towards Florida coming up right after this break. Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. We are tracking Hurricane Ian as it inches towards the Florida coast. We can report that Hurricane Ian, as per the 2 a.m. update, which was the latest update from the National Hurricane Center, is still a Category 3 hurricane, moving at 10 miles per hour with sustained winds at 120 miles per hour. The last update did say that Ian was moving closer to the west coast of Florida, and it is expected to cause life-threatening storm surge, catastrophic winds, and flooding in the Florida Peninsula. Those are the words of the National Hurricane Center. We do know that this Category 3 hurricane did touch down in Cuba just yesterday, flooding fields, toppling trees, and knocking out the power grid. That is correct. Cuba is currently in the dark after Hurricane Ian touched down as a Category 3, devastating some of the country's most important tobacco farms when it hit the island's western tip just yesterday. Authorities were working overnight to restore some of the service to the country's 11 million people, according to a statement from Cuba's electric union. Power was initially knocked out to about 1 million people in Cuba's western provinces, but later the entire grid collapsed. So this is obviously a layer to this story that we're going to continue to monitor as Cuba first felt the brunt of this storm that is now headed towards the Florida coast. We were expecting landfall in a direct hit to the Tampa Bay area initially, but it does appear that that cone has shifted a bit to be a direct hit slightly more south to the Fort Myers area. So we're going to continue to update where this eye is headed. We are expecting another update at the 5 o'clock mark later on this morning. So of course, we'll bring that to you live, raw and unfiltered when it does come down. We do want to take you through a series of videos that have come into our newsroom of this system as it does approach the Florida coast. Here is a look at some surfers taking advantage in Key West of the waves that obviously were present yesterday as this storm did inch towards the western portion of Florida, so obviously caused some waves that are probably very good for surfers, although I definitely wouldn't recommend doing this. Residents out in Tampa are also making sure that they are prepared for this system. We are, of course, monitoring a system that is tracking now slightly more south and slightly more east, so it's not going to be, or is not expected to be, a direct hit to Tampa anymore. But that doesn't mean that the residents in that area of Florida were not fully prepared for what could have potentially been, and what still will be, one of the first major hurricanes in nearly 100 years. Here's more video as this storm approached overnight. There you're seeing the palm trees just swaying in the wind and the storm surge begin to pick up. That is one of the major key components to this system. Central Florida could expect 15 to 20 inches of rainfall with localized rainfall of up to 24 inches. We're expecting storm surge to be around 10 feet on the western coast of Florida. We did see 14-foot storm surge in Cuba that was expected there. And it is worth noting, for those of you tuning in, this storm is still expected to intensify. It is still out in the Gulf of Mexico. As you're seeing there, those warm waters will cause it to strengthen. So it is now a Category 3, but we could potentially be looking at a Category 4 once it does make landfall there. We do have more video coming into our newsroom as this individual drove through Key West, and there you're seeing a lot of rainfall, some flooding on the streets of Key West, and obviously the palm trees really swaying in the wind there. We also had the situation on the ground in Tampa where obviously fuel shortages are starting to be felt, some supply shortages as well. So we will continue to monitor this track as it does make its way closer to the Florida Peninsula. We do want to touch base with our reporters who have been covering this story for us since the very beginning. We do have our Fox News correspondent Phil Keating, who's in St. Petersburg, with the latest. Let's listen in.
Florida and local leaders want to see a beach town, practically a ghost town, nearly empty, as most residents are heeding the warnings and following the mandatory evacuation orders, heading inland, uphill, potentially for their own lives. Hurricane Ian made landfall early this morning in western Cuba as a Category 3, pummeling the island with heavy rains and wind, causing damage. In Pasagril, a tiny beach town southwest of Tampa, the last day for hanging protective shutters and plywood is today.
We're just trying to do what we can do, you know what I'm saying? All we can do is just get stuff in here, protect our building, and then go from there. Only God's in control of what happens with a storm.
Last-minute grocery store runs for food and water? Good luck. Shelves have been depleted in many cases as hurricane-hardened Floridians fully expect to lose power for days. Governor Ron DeSantis has activated 5,000 National Guard troops, some on loan from out of state, and is pre-deploying search and rescue teams as a 10 to 15-foot storm surge and flooding is forecast. He's dedicating special attention to the state's significant elderly population.
We do have emergency refills of maintenance prescriptions. Those are authorized for another 30 days. We do report today 100% of operating long-term care facilities do have a generator on site.
This could be the worst storm to slam Tampa Bay in 100 years. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell magnified the seriousness of the threat today from the White House.
By the time it reaches the shores of Florida, the storm is going to slow down to approximately 5 miles per hour. And this is significant because what this means is that Floridians are going to experience the impacts from this storm for a very long time.
And as of 5 o'clock Tuesday night, Tampa International Airport closed for the duration. And over in Orlando, its airport will be doing the same in the morning. In Pasagril, Florida, Phil Keating, Fox News.
And thank you to Phil for that report. We do want to actually send
this
you
is exactly
out live
what state of Florida and local
coverage
leaders
of, and we're going to say goodbye to Phil now because we do want to send you out live to our coverage of Fox Tampa, a 13 team who are obviously covering this storm very closely. They were anticipating and bracing for a direct hit, although it does appear that that direct hit is now going to be a bit more southeast in the Fort Myers area. So let's listen in here.
And there's lightning also around the center of this storm, those little white dots, another sign that this storm continues to intensify. And don't be surprised in a few hours if this is not a Category 4 hurricane, okay? It's got the pressure of a Category 4 hurricane, and sometimes it takes the winds a while to catch up to it. We will see as reconnaissance aircraft flies around in there. Still on target with that northeasterly movement to make that landfall, maybe just north of the Fort Myers area sometime this evening. So really we're running out of time right along the coast to prep and get ready for this. Here's your official, the track forecast came out at 11 o'clock last night, and I don't think that the track forecast is going to move much. They may jog it 10 miles here, 10 miles there, and that's really about it. But it's really kind of that west-southwest Florida going to get that impact from this storm. My question is, how strong is it going to be once it makes landfall? And again, they're forecasting this to become a Category 4 storm. The pressure is that of a Category 4 storm. So it's really kind of doing exactly what the forecasts have held. So with this forecast, with the fact that it's coming on shore as a Category 4 hurricane, all those counties shaded in red will at least get hurricane-force wind gusts at some point in the duration of this storm. Now, for the Sarasota area, obviously it would be a lot sooner than, say, up around Polk County. So for Polk County, Hardy County, Highlands County, more or less tonight would be your hurricane-force winds. And then late this afternoon and this evening for more of the Sarasota County area, and then we'll get some wind gusts in Pinellas and Hillsborough as well. So the impacts, 70-mile-per-hour winds, storm surge mainly to the south of Tampa Bay. Flooding rain, that's the big problem, and tornadoes. Heavy rain, gusts of 40 miles per hour for my friends north of us, and then inland locations. It's going to be a tough storm, guys. It didn't look that way at first. Now it does. Winds of 75 miles per hour or higher. Isolated tornadoes, localized flooding. That's Polk, Hardy, DeSoto, and Highlands County. So got much more coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, Dave, thank you. Manatee County, the clock is ticking for people to evacuate safely. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered for everyone in zones A and B. Officials say if you haven't left by now, you are almost at a time. Not at a time, but almost at a time.
And Fox 13's Elizabeth Fry joins us live from outside the storm shelter at Braden River High School.
Liz, this is good news. The shelters down there are packed, meaning people are following the orders, so that's the good news.
Yeah, it's good news because it means people are definitely listening to what officials have to say. But if you haven't heeded those warnings just yet, it means that you need to get on it right now. Find a shelter that's open and heed these warnings before it's too dangerous to be out on the roads. Roughly about just under half, I would say, of the shelters here in Manatee County are now at full capacity. So those shelters have closed, leaving just about over 16 or so shelters open to people who still need places to go. Now, currently here in Manatee County, zones A and B are under mandatory evacuation, with Zone C recommended. Tens of thousands of residents heeded the warnings yesterday, with currently 9 of the county's emergency shelters completely at capacity, with folks who didn't want to take any chances. Now, at this time, the message to residents hasn't changed. If you're in an evacuation zone, you still need to get to higher ground and take advantage of one of the shelters that are still open, because at a certain point, it will be too dangerous to make a last-minute decision to evacuate. Now, Manatee County officials say they don't want the storm to bring any fatalities, and that's why they want folks to take these warnings seriously.
My goal and the goal of every person here over the next 48 hours is no fatalities. None.
We don't want people getting complacent. A lot of folks who've lived in this area a long time, they've seen storms come and go, and oh, you know, we were fine. You can't think that way because every storm is different.
And one of the main reasons why officials are asking residents to heed these warnings, that's because at a certain point, law enforcement will not be on the street anymore responding to emergency calls. They are putting their safety as a priority as well. That's why those mandatory evacuations were in place, asking residents to heed the warnings so that they can be safe as well, because once it becomes too dangerous on the roadways, officers will not be responding. Now, like I said, half of them, roughly just under half, I should say, of the shelters here in Manatee County are now full, but we do have a list of all the shelters that are still open on our website, fox13news.com. At a certain point this morning, it is not going to be safe for you to evacuate your home and make it out to one of these shelters. So if you're watching this morning, if you're in between going back and forth, now is the time to leave your house, pack up, and come to one of these shelters. We have seen a few people trickle in the time we've been here this morning, so at least that's reassuring, Walter, that people are listening.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know it's further north, but Sheriff Galtieri of Pinellas County, he said you're on your own if you decide to write it out. So it's kind of the case across the board for sure. Elizabeth Fry, Live Force this morning. We'll talk to you later on. Thanks.
And those who live in zones A and B in Sarasota County are also under mandatory evacuations, and that includes the barrier islands there. Storm surge, flooding, and tornadoes are all big concerns for Sarasota right now. And the emergency management director warns the area will experience power outages and flood damage from Hurricane Ian. The county's 311 Connect line is open for anyone with questions about the storm. And the government has issued several advisories hoping to prevent injuries and deaths during and after the storm. Hurricanes can threaten our safety in ways that many newer Floridians may not realize. Fox 13's Craig Patrick takes a look at some key points to help keep you and your loved ones safe.
As the state PSA shows, keep generators at least 20 feet outside your home. And when people lose AC and open doors and windows, make sure the generator exhaust is not drifting into one of those open doors or windows. Also, don't use generators in the rain and avoid touching any electrical device if it gets wet. Touching down power lines can also kill you. Stay away from them and report them. Also, avoid floodwater, which can have down power lines in them and in places maybe much deeper than you think, and have snakes and other wildlife in it, and be contaminated with a stew of chemicals, germs, and waste that can make you very sick. Now, when a hurricane strikes the coast, the storm surge statistically poses the greatest risk to our lives and property. When the wall of water pushes in, it can knock down walls and wash homes off their foundations. For perspective, here's what Hurricane Andrew did to neighborhoods in South Florida 30 years ago. And looking back at our coverage of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, here are a couple of examples of what we found after the surge pushed through the coast of Biloxi.
Multi-story windjammer condominiums, all fine from the 4th floors up. But look what happened to the first couple of floors. Brick homes completely washed away from the foundation into the home behind it for several blocks, then crushed.
And that was Craig Patrick reporting. Katrina's storm surge was 28 feet, and it only takes 6 inches of rushing water to knock you over. 2 feet of rushing water can carry away cars. Yeah, Mariah was filling us in on that yesterday.
28 feet was Katrina. Wow. All right. In the aftermath of a hurricane, power outages can prolong the misery, but utility companies are ready to respond to get the lights and AC back on as quickly as possible. And new technology that they're using should be a lot of help. Last night, the governor said power companies will have 30,000 linemen positioned across the peninsula to respond to power outages. He expects widespread outages at that. 7 million Floridians lost power after Irma 5 years ago, 2017, if you remember. Some folks were in the dark for weeks. Yesterday, we visited Duke Energy's control room. That's where they monitored the storm, watching for any outages, and if necessary, dispatch the nearest crews to restore power. Technicians here also have access to the grid. It can often restore power from behind their desks. Duke also uses something called self-healing technology. So when the power goes out, the grid knows exactly what to do.
Our power lines can actually reroute along a power outage, such as a tree that may have hit our line. That reduces the number of customers that are impacted and in some cases can reduce the outage time. So that kind of technology, that self-healing, automatically just reroutes itself without us having to intervene with even a dispatcher behind me.
Duke Energy says about half of Pinellas County is covered with that self-healing technology right now, and for problems that don't fix themselves, Duke says it has more than 10,000 line workers and other employees standing by to restore power. They also have some safety advice. If you have any flooding inside your home, turn off the power at the breaker box. Now, obviously, water and electricity don't mix. Man. I remember driving in Hurricane Irma after the eye moved through Lakeland. The photographer and I, we drove out to Polk County, and we drove on I-4 at like 10, 15 miles an hour, looking for power lines with a flashlight just to make sure that we weren't going to drive over live lines.
Yeah, leave it alone. Don't touch it.
Yeah,
don't move it. Still had the Bay Area already feeling the effects of Hurricane Ian.
Yeah, coming up after the break, we'll check in with Dave for the latest on this track. We'll be right back.
And back out to our X-Rad radar we go. We're going to continue to dip in and out of our Fox 13 Tampa coverage as the morning progresses. We do have an update from the National Hurricane Center on the location of this storm. It is still a Category 3 storm with winds at 120 miles per hour. But as per the last update from the National Hurricane Center that came down in the 4 o'clock hour, the storm, Hurricane Ian, is 85 miles west-southwest of Naples, Florida. So you are seeing it inch closer and closer to the west coast of Florida. We are expecting an update from Governor Ron DeSantis on Hurricane Ian to come through at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. But before that, we will get a complete update from the National Hurricane Center at